This video is sponsored by Squarespace. You make me a cup of tea. Mistreatment of the parents. Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in a tub. And who do you think they be? The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, with some delicious etymology. In this video, let's look at some of the traditional trades and where they get their names. Did butchers only butcher bucks? What do we used to call a female baker? And what does Joe Biden have in common with a candlestick maker? I'm going to answer all of these questions and many more. Find out why a carpenter is merely a carriage maker, why a blacksmith is practically a poet, and why talking cobblers could be considered quite rude. This is the first in what I suspect could be quite a few videos looking at crafts, jobs and trades and where they get their names. So get your overalls on, roll up your sleeves and let's get down to work. So, first off, what is a trade? Well, it's the route we choose to take in life, isn't it? Or more accurately, the path that we choose to tread. The word trade comes from the Old English verb tredan, which became our modern verb to tread. But if the word trade isn't quite haughty enough for you and you prefer to think of yourself as a member of an esteemed profession, you might like to know that being a professional is actually all about swearing. It flipping is. The word profession comes from the swearing or professing of an oath, originally on joining a religious order, but later on joining a trades guild. So I just zipped through those two because I'm really excited to get stuck into where some of the many traditional trades got their names. So, where to start? Well, I mentioned the butcher, the baker and the candlestick maker, so let's let that bath-bound trio kick us off and begin with butcher, and it makes for a beautiful start. So butcher comes from Old French, in Anglo-Norman French, which is the language that was spoken by William the Conqueror and his lot after they'd invaded England. The word they used was boucher, which is actually what butcher is in French today. Now, butcher and boucher have the same broad meaning of someone who trades in meats, but their origins suggest a rather more specific job. Boucher has its roots in bok, meaning a male goat. It has the same root as buck and also the South African English word bok, meaning antelope, which entered English from Afrikaans, which in turn got it from Dutch, where it meant male goat. So a butcher is not a trader in any old meat, actually. Originally, it meant a trader specifically in goat meat. Funny that these days in England, at least, they deal in just about any meat but goat. So that's the butcher. Now, the baker. Okay, so this is a bit of an easy one, really. I mean, baker has recognizable relatives across the Germanic languages, and a baker is simply someone who bakes. The Old English word for to bake, used over 1,000 years ago, was bakan. Now, baker starts to get really interesting, though, when you look at the variations that English used to have on that word. For example, did you know that English used to have a separate word for a female baker? It still exists these days as a fairly common surname. It's Baxter. Now, we spell it with an X, but in the past, it was also sometimes spelt with KST in the middle. The STER is a suffix historically used in Germanic languages to denote the female version of something. For example, did you know that a female brewer is a brewster? And that word's still sometimes used. Now, bakers weren't only binary based on gender, they also used to be divided along lines of colour. Much like bread these days, they were split along the lines of brown and white. So-called brown bakers made hearty, healthy loaves, nutritious and delicious, I'm sure, but the white bakers baked the really popular stuff, sweeter, whiter loaves that were much more popular with the masses. White bakers and brown bakers actually could rarely be found breaking bread together because they didn't get on at all. Their rye-based rivalry peaked in the 14th century when they formed separate guilds and were only actually reunited more than 250 years later by order of Queen Elizabeth I herself. So that's the butcher and the baker, the candlestick maker coming up, along with the cobbler, carpenter and blacksmith. But first, let me introduce you to our sponsor, Squarespace. Now, whatever your trade, Squarespace empowers you to create your online presence and launch your passion project. I've just set up my own website, robwords.com, using Squarespace, and it was so easy. I went from nothing to having a professional looking site within just a couple of hours. Squarespace has tons of templates to choose from. It also has this brilliant drag and drop system that makes positioning elements precisely on your page really, really simple. And also connecting your social media accounts and adding a contact section are also super easy. And I'm really pleased with how it's turned out so far. So head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/robwords to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So we've done the butcher and the baker, now the candlestick maker. Now on the face of it, this is an obvious one, isn't it? Candlestick makers get their name from the fact that they make candlesticks, which were originally basically anything that held a candle. But when we delve a little bit deeper, this one really starts to shine. Firstly, the big surprise for me on researching this one was that the word candle doesn't come to us from French. Old English had the word candle. It got it from Latin, which in turn comes from the Latin candere, meaning to shine. From candere, we get all sorts of other words as well. Incandescent, for example, meaning glowing with heat. If someone is incandescent with rage, they are so furious they're emitting light. Candere also gives us candid via the Latin candidus, meaning white. Now we mostly use it in a figurative sense, meaning to be open and clear. Candor made the same journey. And believe it or not, the word candidate also has the same root. So how can that be? Well, because Romans seeking office wore gleaming white robes to stand out from the crowd. Nowadays, actually, a candidate might be hoping to reach the White House. So we've come full circle. This is the sort of etymology I live for. Who knew that candles, candidates, and candid camera were all related? Next to the white heat of the forge and the blacksmith. Smith is a lovely old word. It existed over 1,000 years ago in Old English. It was written like that, and you can see it had that marvellous old th letter, eth. Remember, Old English had two letters that made a th sound, eth and thorn. This one is eth. Now, it meant someone who works with metals back then, and indeed it does now, but some Germanic languages have used it in a broader sense than that. For example, you can have a shoesmith, and Old Icelandic had this beautiful word, ljóðsmither, which I've almost certainly pronounced wrong, and that meant poem smith. So a poet. Gorgeous, isn't it? Now, a blacksmith is someone who works with the so-called black metals, basically heavy metals, chiefly iron. But did you know you can also have a whitesmith? They worked with, guess what? White metals. That's precious metals like gold or silver, or other metals like pewter. Another profession I do just want to drop in here is that of the coppersmith, mainly because the word copper has a wonderful and I think surprising etymology. Did you know that copper is named after a place? Can you guess which one? Well, how about if I show you the Latin root of the word? The Romans named the metal after the island where they used to get a lot of it, Cyprus. And from Cyprium, we ultimately get copper. From coppers to cobblers now, or should that be shoesmiths? No, we're looking at cobblers. The word cobbler appears in Middle English in these two forms here, and you'd assume that the word comes from someone who cobbles. But actually, the word cobbler appears in English before cobble. So cobble was coined to describe what a cobbler does. It's what's called a back formation. But where cobbler comes from, We simply don't know. There's a school of thought that it perhaps comes from the Old French coubler, which is a variant of coupler, meaning to bring two things together, to couple. But the Oxford English Dictionary says that that's not tenable. It doesn't explain why, but it's not convinced. Cobbler has a few other usages though. First up, it describes all manner of pies and tarts in the United States. Why are they called cobblers? Well, again, I'm sorry, but no one seems to be certain. It might be because that the ingredients are, cobbled together, or it's perhaps because of the delicious crumbly crust on top, providing an almost cobbled surface. Another use of cobbler, or more specifically cobblers, is in the UK, where it means nonsense, as in, don't listen to Rob, he's talking a load of cobblers again. Cobblers used in this sense is from Cockney rhyming slang and is a shortening of cobbler's awls, as in the tools used by cobblers. And cobbler's awls is rhyming slang for balls, as in testicles. Now, if you're talking cobblers, you might be accused of carping on. Carpenter is our next traditional trade. So a carpenter these days is someone who works with... So a carpenter these days is someone who works with wood, and indeed it's had a meaning along those lines for as long as it's been in English. It entered Middle English from French, where it meant that as well. But the French word comes from the late Latin word carpentarius, which did not mean woodworker or anywhere near anything as general. It was specific, and it meant carriage maker. Latin in turn appears to have got the word from Old Celtic, where carpentum meant cart, and indeed carpentum is the source of the modern Irish word for carriage. So a carpenter is a carriage maker, and we got it from the French. But before we nabbed it off them, Old English had its own word for what we now call a carpenter, and I can see why we got rid of it, because it was a monster. It was that. Now I can try and say it, but it'll be embarrassing for all of us. Anyway, if we were still using it in English today, we'd be saying tree right. Another fun fact about carpenters, in German, one of the words for carpenter is Zimmermann, which you might know as a surname, Zimmermann. It's quite a common one, isn't it? The man bit means man, as you might expect, but the Zimmer bit doesn't mean room, as Zimmer generally does in German. It means something else, and it has a relative in English. Timber! It's timber. Oh gosh, is that the time? Okay, that's a lot for this time round. Haberdashers, mongers, masons and grocers to come in a later video, unless you're watching this in the future, and then you can probably just click play right now. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do hit like and subscribe, and why not share it with your local carpenter, cobbler or candlestick maker. Until next time, take care.